Welcome to Finding Holiness, where we delve into timeless Torah wisdom, revealing the sacred in everyday moments. Join us on a journey to elevate your spirituality and discover holiness in every aspect of life. I'm your host, Rabbi David Kadosh, and together, let's embark on a path of spiritual exploration. I hope you enjoy this next episode. All right, continuing with Masechet Yevamot, we are in Perek Daled, Mishna Yud. The Mishnah says, "Hayevama lo tachalot velo tityabem ad sheyesh la shelosha chodashim." The Yevama the woman should not perform chalitza or be taken into yibum until she has waited 3 months since her husband died. We spoke about this yesterday, so we know whether or not she's pregnant from her deceased husband, and therefore she would be prohibited in performing yibum. V'chen kol she'ar hanashim lo yitarsu. Similar, all other women who remarry should not become mitaris, which is like the first step, the first stage, engaged, betrothed in marriage. Velo yinasu, and certainly should not have their marriage completed. That's a second step of marriage. Ad sheyun lahen shelosha chodashim, until they pass through 3 months after their marriage ended, either through death or through divorce, so that we know for sure that they are not pregnant. Echad betulot ve'echad be'ulot. This law applies to both virgins and both to non-virgins, whether they had relations with their first husband or not. Echad gerushot ve'echad almanot. It applies to divorced women and widows. Echad nesuot ve'echad arusot, and both to women that were fully married to their first husbands, or even just partially married to their first husbands, just engaged. Rabbi Yehuda is more lenient, and he says, hanesuot yitarsu. Women who were fully married to their first husband may immediately get engaged, the first step of a marriage, to their second husband. He's not worried that they're going to have relations. Veharusot yinasu, and women who were only at the first stage of marriage engaged, they are able to complete their marriage with their second husband, because we assume that they didn't have relations with the first husband. The only exception would be, says Rabbi Yehuda, chutz min ha'arusot shebeYehuda. This leniency applies everywhere, with the exception of those who are arusot, the first stage of marriage, women who live in Judea. They still have to wait 3 months before fully marrying another man, because the practice in Judea, in Yehuda, was to have a newly engaged couple, be alone together so that he can familiarize himself with the girl when they complete their marriage. And therefore, there is a worry that maybe he did have, though they may have relations, while they are still in the stage of erusin. Rabbi Yosef says, Kol hanashim yitarsu chutz min ha'albana mipenei ha'ibul. All women are able to get engaged immediately after their first marriage ends, except for the widow, because the widow is mipenei ha'ibul. She's in a period of mourning, of observing of her first husband. So therefore, she cannot practice or actually get engaged to a second husband. Mishnah Yud Aleph. Arba'a achin nesuin arba nashim vametu. If 4 of the brothers in one family were married to 4 women, and all the brothers died, im ratza hagadol shebahem leyabem et kulam. So now there are, there's another brother, okay, if the oldest of the living brothers, must have been a big family, wants to perform yibum with all 4 widows at one shot, hareshut beyado, he has the right to do so. He can do yibum with all 4 widows. Mishaya nasui, again, this is a time where people married more than one wife. Mishaya nasui lishte nashim vamet. If someone was married to 2 women and he died, biata o chalitzata shel achat mehen poteret tzarata. So once he has cohabitation with the with the Yevama, or he performs chalitza with one of the widows, then that exempts the co-wife from yibum and chalitza. She can now feel free to remarry without receiving a chalitza. We're going to talk about this more in the next parak. Haita achat keshera ve'achat pesula. Let's say one of the widows was keshera, eligible to marry a kohen, and the other one, ve'achat pesula, the other one was disqualified, which means that maybe this widow had been previously divorced, okay, before this marriage, and therefore she's disqualified to marry a kohen. So now, imaya holetz, if the living brother is going to perform chalitza now, chalitza disqualifies a woman from kehuna. So therefore the Mishnah says, choletz la pesula. Remember, you can only do chalitza on one. The moment he does chalitza on one, the other one's exempt. That's what we learned in the previous Mishnah. So the Mishnah says, do the chalitza on the pesula, so that the other one that's keshera can still maybe marry a kohen. If you perform it on the keshera, then now she's also disqualified from marrying a kohen. So therefore the Mishnah says, choletz la pesula. He should perform chalitza on the disqualified widow. Ve'im hayam meyabem, but if he was planning to perform yibum, meyabem la keshera, he should do yibum. He is allowed to do the yibum with the woman who is eligible to a kohen. Hamachzir gerushato, someone who takes back his wife after his divorced wife after she married someone else, which is not allowed to do. Once a woman is divorced and marries someone else, the husband can no longer take back that woman. But let's say he did, okay? Ve'anoseh chalutzato, or someone then marries his chalutza. So you perform chalutza, and then later on he marries her, which he's not allowed to do. Ve'anoseh kerovat chalutzato, or someone who marries a close relative of his chalutza. In all these situations, yotzi, he has to send her away. He cannot stay married to this girl. Ve'havalad mamzer, and the child that comes out of this union is a mamzer, cannot marry a regular Yisrael. He can only marry a mamzer. Divrei Rabbi Akiva, these are the words of Rabbi Akiva, because according to Rabbi Akiva, all of these marriages violate a biblical commandment, which the penalty is malkut, and Rabbi Akiva says that any child that is born from a prohibition that involves malkut is the child is a mamzer. The Chachamim say en avalad mamzer. Rabbis argue and say, although they have to send her away, he cannot remain married to her, but the child is not a mamzer. Umodim, however, they do agree, benose kerovat gerushato, with regard to someone who marries the relative of the wife he divorced, she'avalad mamzer, that the child is a mamzer, because that union is punishable by karet, and therefore a child born through karet, he agrees. The only exception, well, we're going to see what the exception is. It was brought down here. The only exception would be if a child is born from a woman who is nida, even though a person who cohabits with a nida is chayav karet, but a child born from that union is not a mamzer. That's the exception. Speaking of mamzer, that's what the next Mishnah talks about. Ezehu mamzer. It's Mishnah Yud Gimel in Perek Dalet. Who is a mamzer? Kol she'er basar shehu belo yavo. It's a child of a forbidden relationship with any relative to which the Torah says lo yavo. You cannot cohabit with this person. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. This is Rabbi Akiva's words, meaning even if it's a lo yavo, which is a general lav, the punishment is malkut, lashes. Rabbi Akiva holds child that's born from there, mamzer. Shimon HaTimni Omer, Shimon HaTimni says, Kol shechayavin alav karet bidei shamayim. Any forbidden relationship where someone will be chayav karet in the hands of heaven. V'halacha kidvarav, and the halacha follows his view. A third opinion. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, Kol shechayavim alav mitat beddin. A mamzer is a child of any forbidden relationship which one would be punished by execution by the hands of the court. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Azai. Rabbi Shimon ben Azai is bringing support to Rabbi Yoshua. Matzati Megillat Yuchasim Birushalayim. I once found a scroll, like a family tree, a scroll of Yuchsim, lineage, in Yerushalayim. Vekatuv ba, and it was written there, Ish Peloni Mamzer Me'eshet Ish. So and so This is his name, who is a mamzer from the relationship between a man and a married woman. That's how they labeled him.
Did they mention name?
They probably did mention the name. It's well known this guy would be a mamzer. But this is lekayem divrei Rabbi Yoshua, because Rabbi Yoshua holds that a mamzer is someone who is punished by death at the hands of court, and if a person marries an eshet ish, chayav mitah. That's why he's got punished execution. So this is a proof to Rabbi Yoshua. However, again, the Mishnah said the halacha is like Shimon HaTimni. Ishto shemeta, returning to the subject of marrying the relatives of certain women. If a man's wife died, mutar ba'achota, he's permitted to marry her sister. Geresha umeta, if he divorced his wife and she died, mutar ba'achota, he's permitted to marry her sister. Nis'et le'acher v'meta, if the divorced wife married someone else and died, mutar ba'achota, he can marry her sister. Yevimto shemeta, if a man's yevama passed away, mutar ba'achota, he's allowed to marry her sister. And lastly, chalash la umeta, if he performed chalitza with her and she died, mutar ba'achota, he's permitted to marry her sister. Okay, that is the end of Perek Dalet. Now, Perek Hey discusses in depth some of the laws of matrimony between a yavam and a yevama. So, according to the Torah, there's only one way, one official way that a person can perform the mitzvah of yibum, and that's through marital relations. It has to be through cohabitation. That's what according to Torah. And by doing the yibum, by performing yibum, you erase all the other yibum bonds with the co-wives or anybody else, and they're free to marry everybody else. The only way to remove a yibum bond officially according to Torah is through chalitza. Okay? Chalitza, the thing with the shoe, which we're going to talk about soon. Okay? That is the only way that we can remove the yibum bond officially according to Torah. Came the rabbis and instituted a different way to perform this kiddushin. This is the ma'amar that we spoke about. This act of kiddushin, which is the ma'amar, that also kind of solves the yibum or engages the yibum. And as well, the rabbis also enacted that if the yavam gives the yevama a get, a divorce document, if he gives her a get, that is also like a chalitza. So there are 4 actions that can be taken by a yavam that affect the status of the widow: giving a get, performing chalitza, or that's again assuming he doesn't want the lady. And if he does want the lady, he could make a ma'amar, or he can perform, or he could do cohabitation, which is the actual performing of the yibum. 2 of them are biblical, like we said, which is the cohabiting and the chalitza, and 2 of them are rabbinic, the get and the ma'amar. So with that introduction, the 5th chapter talks a lot about this. It discusses if a person does the same act twice with the same lady, it's obviously meaningless. The question is, the Mishnah is going to talk about, what if he does the same act with 2 different widows of the brother, so 2 co-wives of the brother? Does the second act have any practical effect? Because once I perform a get with one lady, then why do I need to perform the get with the other? She's already p'turah. So that's what the Mishnah talks about. Rabban Gamliel, this is the opening Mishnah of Perek Hey. Rabban Gamliel Omer, En get ahar get. There is no significance to giving a get after a get. So meaning if the yavam gave a divorce document to one of the widows and then gave a get to the co-wife, the second get has no effect, and therefore he's still permitted to marry the second wife's relatives. All right, if the get meant anything, then he wouldn't be able to marry the relatives of the second wife, of the co-wife. But the get doesn't mean anything according to Rabban Gamliel, because the first get already did the job. Velo ma'amar achal ma'amar, and as well, there's no significance to giving a ma'amar after a ma'amar. Meaning, if the yavam gave or made a ma'amar with one widow and then did it with the second widow, the second ma'amar is meaningless. He's permitted to marry her relatives. Velo be'ila achar be'ila, nor is there significance to cohabitation after cohabitation, because the first cohabitation already fulfilled the mitzvah of yibum and completely erased the second yibum bond. He might have to bring a korban, maybe, but whatever. Velo chalitza achar chalitza, and there's no significance of a chalitza after a chalitza because the first chalitza removed the yibum bond. Chachamim omrim, the Chachamim argue, and they say, yes, get achar get. There is significance to a get after a get, because even after the first get, there's still a yibum bond, and therefore, if a guy gives a second get to the other co-wife, he cannot marry her relatives. But yes, ma'amar achar ma'amar. There is a significance to a ma'amar after a ma'amar, and therefore he wouldn't be able to marry the relatives of the second wife. Aval, they do agree, lo achar be'ilah velo achar chalitza klum. After cohabitation or after chalitza, there is nothing. Meaning, no yibum related act can take place after cohabitation or the chalitza because the bonds are removed completely. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll continue tomorrow.